Well, we are here this afternoon with Andrea Lauer. She was the former pretrial supervisor at Gallatin County Sheriff's Office. Was that correct? And
Court services.
Court services, sorry. I got a little mixed up there. And we're going to talk about some general policies surrounding criminal justice reform, specifically with alternative sentencing and rehabilitation programs, and looking at it as a remedy to some of the jail crowding issues that many places face. What is jail crowding, and how do recidivism rates affect that? How has it historically changed? Has it gotten worse or better? And has the system changed to look at mental health issues as a cause for those rates increasing?
So some of the causes of jail overcrowding can be the size of the community. The community might be growing. So an obvious reason would be you might need a larger jail. But there's also other factors that might play in, as much as like the amount of bond someone has to post in order to be able to be released from jail. There may be mental illness. They may not understand the court process. They may be non-English speaking, which all factors into why they are still in the jail and unable to get back in the community. Some of the system issues might be the intake process, how long it might be in court. Some of those are more short-term issues as opposed to long-term issues, though. And then a lot of them return to violating conditions of their release, or it might be their probation and parole. So some of the things like the recidivism rate may be affected by jail overcrowding. The defendants the pretrial ones are typically in the jail less than a year. But once they've reached the jail and they're able to get out of jail, they have to return to a home, a job, possibly their kids, and some of those services that helped them prior to going to jail may have been stripped or, just upside down. So they have to reconnect with those services. So once they're sentenced, they also need to meet with counselors and mental health. And a lot of times those services as well are out of, in the community that they need to reconnect with. And they may find it easier if they're homeless and have a hard time connecting that way. They might find themselves back in the jail. So historically, the punishment was harsh, hard labor. There were no true rehabilitation efforts. There was also the war on drugs, decriminalization, medical and mental health assistance has changed. So there is some things now that have improved in that sense. Some states do better than others in terms of recidivism rates. There's more access to services because of being urban versus rural. The resources, the budgets, and different legislation that might currently be in place. Mental health, there's a lot of diversion programs than there was in previous years. There's also grants and monies available for implementing new programs. For example, the crisis intervention program, which is steered toward law enforcement, that diverts people away from the jail. They might get connected to mental health services as opposed to going straight to jail. There's also sober living, treatment facilities, and then specialty courts that also pull people away from the jail. A lot of times more of a fast track and able to get them out of jail as opposed to sitting there for the year or longer waiting trial. People that are affected by jail overcrowding, that can be the jail staff itself. It can be any of the people working within the system, the stakeholders, the courts themselves, family members, as well as the victims and the community. If you're not able to house someone within the jail, it may pose a safety risk to the community. And if those agencies that are connected, the services that are tied to people being released from the jail, those numbers also will go up. So their services might be, you might have less services in community if more people are actually, out of the jail seeking those services. Some of the policy changes, alternatives, and rehabilitation, again, that's stakeholders. You're looking at the victims in the community. It might put pressure again on those services. Their numbers do go up. They become busier, but there are, alternatives out there for like alcohol and drug classes, the therapy programs, mental health providers in the community. Those who oppose and support the alternatives, it could work both ways. You might have victims and their family members, those that might have been harmed by a crime that was committed. They may not see the alternative sentencing as a harsh punishment. But on the flip side of that, they might also see that as an alternative way or a non-traditional way to, other than prison and jail, so that they are at home, they're working with their kids, they are able to pay their fines, their court costs, and maybe the restitution that might be owed to a victim. So that could be seen on both sides. Who I would say is mostly impacted, that might depend upon the scope of that agency and your services within, where you work. That might require some thinking outside the box. There are laws and statutes in place. Some are archaic, some need to be updated. And sometimes those types of things also lead to change. So common solutions to jail overcrowding, like I'd said earlier, that would obviously be a new jail, more beds. That may not be the best solution though. Alternatives to incarceration, looking at the current process of how the system does work. Some of those feel-good programs, they may not measure like an evidence-based program or looking at statistics and things that really do work. Looking at other studies, working with consultants maybe that have worked with other communities similar. It might require a review of the budget and the cost of the programs, the effectiveness, and again, like you might be looking at some older laws that might be updated. Some policies that would address the problem. You might be in meetings at a local level. It might be based on an incident that occurred, like I said, someone dangerous being released in the community. You may have a jail suicide. It might be a bond issue where people actually have to go before the voters to build a new building. So those things do impact some of the issues when you are looking at a new jail or overcrowding. And even the alternative programs do cost money in the budget. So who gains, who loses? That would depend, I guess, on if you're looking at incarceration or if you're looking at alternatives. So again, the community, the inmates, their families, the victims, any of the stakeholders, they could be affected positively or negatively for different reasons. Again, like I said, if restitution's paid, the victim is helped, and then the offenders themselves are seeking services in the community that would help better them. And then that way they're, able to be held accountable and pay back their debt. Some of the alternative policies, when you look at studies being done, not just, locally, you have a consultant possibly come in, you're looking at things nationally or internationally that might need to be locally implemented. These grants or federal monies that you might be able to obtain to review policies and procedures to improve the system, looking at what works. It might shift the way some have traditionally thought of things. They might have to review and warm up to change. Others might do a lot of research, for different solutions. And I think anytime that you do the review and the research, I think that it is effective in bringing new ideas and new ways to do things to the table.
What has Gallatin County done in your time there as far as alternatives?
Yeah, so previous to this position, I had also worked in a jail, and I had worked in the older jail that was built in the 1970s. And at the time, it was overcrowded and out of room. Concrete building, not a lot of services or, availability for groups or meetings within that jail as well. And we now have the larger jail, which does hold more people. But it also has provided a lot of volunteer opportunities within. They've got a great program over there that helps bring services and some of these other programs inside the jail. And then once people are released, in 2005, the office came together to become court services. And we do provide community service, misdemeanor probation. We have the DUI impact panels that are also set up through MAD. And we've got the pretrial supervision, drug and alcohol testing. We've got GPS monitoring. So there are alternate ways to supervise people within the community once they're safely released. And so we do have upwards around 1,000 people on our typical caseload within the office at any given time. So there's a lot of people in our community that are currently going through the court system or have been sentenced and seeking services here as part of, what they've been sentenced to do in court. So I think Bozeman's come a long ways, and that was one of those things that they did see, was that in order to, you need the jail beds, you need the accountability. Some of those things are written into statutes, but you also need things that can help people so they can rehabilitate or seek the services they need, whether it's housing or jobs, or it might be assistance with childcare, things like that on the outside that they wouldn't be able to work on while they're inside the jail. So.
Okay, that's awesome. I'm glad to see that Gallatin County is making a bit more progressive change than other places as far as addressing what is happening and like looking at a more humanities-based perspective when helping these people and trying to serve justice. And real quick for the people listening, can you run over your role and your title and what you do?
Sure. So I'm the treatment court coordinator currently. I actually transitioned to that about a month ago, so it's fairly recent. But I do oversee the coordination of the court, making sure that we're on top of all the different participants in the court and making sure they're getting to their appointments and drug and alcohol testing and seeing their probation officer and then getting back into court on those days that court is scheduled. And most of them are in the program for 18 months. And they may see, 2 or 3 years of probation following the treatment court, but that does provide them with a lot of services that they would have possibly not have the opportunity to work with otherwise. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming to talk to us today. And you really helped us look a little bit closer on what Gallatin County is doing and what could be done in the state of Montana. I know that there is some bills in the legislature right now that they're looking at that are more along the lines of criminal justice reform. There's the certificate of rehabilitation program, which I personally think is going to help a lot of people if it passes. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to really look at that one yet, but it may be something that you might be interested in because it would probably affect what you guys do every day too. But sounds good, and thank you again, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.
Thank you.